David, you had one.
Lots of things. On the engaging young people, it'd be good, Annalise, if you could put out a newsletter from Parliament and perhaps send it to all members. On the towering inferno, one thing that really worried me about that is one building went on fire and we were in complete chaos. I thought we had a sort of integrated sort of catastrophe policy, which might involve, a huge terrorist attacks or nuclear war or something. They were running around like headless chickens. Really, we had no idea what they were doing. And I really hope that you or anybody can push for. There didn't seem to be anybody in control. Lots of things could have happened there. We could have had water being brought up from the tents. We could have had firefighters from Heathrow. All sorts of things could have been done to fight that fire, but it just seems to be there's the fire service, and well, it's their job, and that's it. That was hopeless. One thing I want to add is, the policies that we have, say nationalising the railways. When I was, a Tory said to me, well, it was hopeless when it was nationalised before. Now, I think we've got to put. I think we've got to put our cards on the table in terms of how nationalisation has been successful on the continent. And a lot of the policies that we're putting forward are actually normal and successful overseas. And every time I see it throughout all our politics, we don't seem to think that the rest of the world exists. We never look outside to see what has been successful. You talked about the baccalaureate. We just seem to think, well, A-levels, well, more exams or make them harder or something. Anyway, there you go.
And don't forget, of course, the public railways are doing very good in this country, aren't they? Yes, sir.
I'm David Morgan,
Yeah, David.
a new member. I've lived in the area on and off for about 40 years, but I grew up in Coventry. Just a question, going back to the beginning, sort of both speakers, which is there'll be an election at some point, perhaps in the not too distant future. And the question from the gentleman behind me was about Brexit. And, I've been amusing myself reading the latest Theresa May accident on last night. And if I sort of reflect on it, I think, actually we talk about it as if it's a negotiation, but it's not a negotiation in the commercial sense. There's going to be a massive long-term procedural negotiation where actually the European machine, because it is so organised and so bureaucratic, will actually be asking us a bunch of questions. What's your answer to this one? And we'll be battling away on it for quite some time. And I can easily see 2 years turning into 7 before we end up somewhere different. How different, I don't know. I think the turning point for me in the election, you said it, and Sarah, was actually the manifesto. Because I've got lifetime wealthy Conservative voting friends who for the first time in their life voted Labour. And they voted Labour because of that manifesto and because actually they look around them. And I used to ride around Coventry navigating by the car factories. If I was to ride around Coventry now, I'd navigate by the food banks. So, it's food banks, it's homeless, it's housing, it's the decimation of the health service, it's the decimation of the fire service, all of those things where people have had enough. And it's a bit of a speech, but the sort of question is to you, how do we keep the real agenda that I think made a difference going over however many months or years, when actually there's going to be a European news cycle geared up to this 4-weekly process, where actually a lot of it's just going to be noise, and the media will look for gaps between the Labour leadership and the Tory leadership, when actually the majority of the people care about what we're trying to create as a country. Because I think ultimately you can think of Brexit simply as nothing more than, well, it's just a different cause of a recession. If you believe it's going to be a negative impact, it's no different to the financial crash. It'll just take different timescale. So the sort of question is, in there, do you think that that's a reasonable position for the Labour leadership, and how do we do that? Because I think there's a danger if we get drawn into Brexit arguments about variations of red or green ones, that actually we lose sight of the social agenda that made such a difference.
I think you've answered your question. We don't, that there's, 262 MPs there, and the front bench is partially focused on Brexit, and those people have specific roles, international trade, shadow Brexit, etc. But our health, home, education shadows are firmly focused on, I think we have capacity, and as a member of the PLP, you'll comment, I'm sure, Annalise, that I think the capacity there in the PLP is adequate to keep. I think we could set the agenda, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's keeping it alive in the country as well as.
Yeah.
Yeah, just very briefly, I think as well the so-called Great Repeal Bill also could be quite a big opportunity for Labour, because I think that the ins and outs of who said what to who in whatever European capital, for most people, will just cause them to switch off the telly. I mean, most people don't really care about that kind of procedural stuff. I don't blame them. But actual aspects of, are we still going to have good quality regulations about drugs or something like that, where you'll have bodies like Cancer Research and others getting involved in the debate as well as just politicians? I think that's going to be much more interesting to the man on the street than some of the argy-bargy. So I think that's where there's a big role for Labour, as well as, exactly as Sarah said, making sure that we keep the spotlight on public services. I actually think it's a bit of a negative point, but in so many areas now, public services are so stretched that they're bound to be on the agenda, because there's so much clamour for that coming from the media. I mean, certainly here in Oxfordshire, you just have to look at the stories that are popping up here on regional news, and it's often driven by public services. Just really quickly, the issue about resilience that David mentioned, I think it's a really important one. Actually, we kind of could have predicted some of this, I think, from an event like the Hull floods. I don't know if people remembered that, when there was a very, very clear breakdown there of basic civil resilience, really. And a lot of people who suffered terribly during that. And it was basically because the public services just could not cope. They've been cut back too far. And if you don't have any slack, you can have as many resilience forums on paper as you like, but you just don't have enough people there who know each other, who aren't just, locums or whatever, aren't just agency staff popping in for 5 minutes and then going away. If you don't have that set up, then you're going to have big problems. And I think that's what we saw, particularly in that borough. We don't want to prejudge anything. There's going to be an inquiry. We need to look at it carefully. But it does look like the basic structures just weren't there to then try and achieve something like the kind of things you were mentioning. And certainly the fire service have been saying to us as MPs that they felt they didn't have the support. I mean, they're very disciplined. It's like with the police. They don't want to publicly criticise politicians, but they're saying to us privately, I'm sure many of us have had this experience, we can't have any more cuts and still provide a safe service. We just can't do it anymore. So I think that resourcing is a big part of the response, really.